Welcome to the Renaissance Achiever with Sarah Fui. Today, I want to talk about shiny object syndrome. Something that I suffer from. Shiny object syndrome, if you're not familiar with the term, refers to when you're easily distracted. You see a shiny object and you want to jump to that and do that instead. And most people who are multi passionate are easily distracted by things that excite them, right? You start writing a book and then you discover watercolors and you learn how to paint. And now you are knitting because it's winter and you want to have a new blanket. Okay. And you jump from one project to the next. And the thing about shiny object syndrome is that oftentimes things go unfinished and there's a lot of shame around that. And for someone who is recognizing this pattern in their life and trying to overcome it, oftentimes we go far to the other side of the spectrum and we say, okay, I can only focus on this one thing until I get it done. And sometimes that is the right approach. Sometimes there is a season where you're like, I need to hyper focus on this one thing because this is the most important thing. For me right now is my podcast. Although I am prioritizing it, it's not the only thing I'm focusing on. I just did a master class not too long ago and I'm launching a group program. So, there's multiple things going on, even though this is my number one thing. I'm a Renaissance achiever at heart, bro. So there are seasons where you may need to hyper focus on one thing when it is the priority. However, you also really need to stay in touch with your intuition because not everything that seems like shiny object syndrome is a distraction. Okay. Not everything that seems like shiny object syndrome is a distraction. And I think there's a lot of shame that multi potentialites experience around, having a desire to start something new or feeling pulled in a new direction when they haven't quite finished one project. And so they often will ignore that intuitive call because they're like, no, 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 I got to stay focused on this. But we have to keep in mind that sometimes there is divine timing and sometimes a project will stall out for a reason because it's not the season for that right now. And that some other things need to come into play for a minute before we can come back to that. There's this quote that I love, famous quote from Steve Jobs, that says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well worn path." And he's referring to sometimes something doesn't logically make sense, right? Sometimes this doesn't seem like it would be the best choice for you to make, but you are being called to it, intuitively pulled to it for a reason. So to trust your gut, trust your intuition, and go for it, even if you're not sure why. So sometimes what we think is shiny object syndrome, where we think we're getting distracted by something new, is actually what I like to call a soul thread. And a soul thread is something that is pulling your soul to something for a reason. You're being divinely called to this thing for a reason. And this thread is pulling you there, and the thread weaves together this tapestry of life. Down the road, you will see how all the dots connect, how all the threads weave together to make this beautiful tapestry. But right now, you can't see the whole tapestry. You just know that you're being pulled in this direction by this soul thread. And so you have to follow your heart and you have to have discernment to recognize, is this a distraction? Is this shiny object syndrome? Or is this a soul thread that is actually connected to my calling in some unknown way, unknown to me at this point in time, but down the road, the dots will connect. It will all make sense. And actually, this soul thread needs to happen in order for my other pursuit to move forward, right? They might seem like two unrelated projects, but down the road, maybe you'll make a connection with someone, maybe you learn a skill, maybe you receive an insight that actually helps your other project to propel forward because you followed this soul thread, right? And so it's really important for you to trust your intuition and to sit in your intuition. How do you tell the difference between shiny object syndrome and a soul thread? I think desire is a big part. Like, people think that it's wrong to just go for something just because you want it, it excites you, you desire it. What's wrong with that? Like, the desires are put in your heart, and I say desires isn't good desires, like not to go out and do harm anyone else, right? But a desire like, I really feel like I need to learn French right now. Go learn French, right? That desire is put there in your heart for a reason. You might practice French on the airplane next to somebody, and they might be someone who, like, you're supposed to be connected with, a soul thread, right? So the desires in your heart, if you feel this desire and joy to do it, follow the joy, follow the bliss, do the things in your life that light you up. Because when you're in this energy of excitement and joy, you are magnetic, you are in creation mode, you are more productive, you are more aligned, right? Sometimes we try to force ourselves, like, I just need to focus, I just need to finish this thing. And it feels like drudgery and it is draining and you are uninspired. Then what you create, just because you feel like you need to focus and force yourself to finish this project before you move on, what you create is not going to have the same energy in it as something that you create when you are in this energy of alignment and excitement and desire. And so, oftentimes, having multiple projects where you're doing something on the side that lights you up so that it gives you that creative energy to complete this first project in a more aligned way, right? And then, aside from that, the shiny object syndrome, how you can recognize that is when you're doing something just because you think you should, or because it worked for someone else, or you saw an ad for it, or somebody shared a personal story, someone you went to high school with got really rich doing this day trading or doing this network marketing or this real estate, and so you're like, that's what I need to do because they got rich doing that. And it has nothing to do with what excites you. You're not passionate about it, you don't necessarily have the skills for it, but you could sign up for this course and do it. And you know someone that absolutely got rich doing that, so you know that it works. That's a shiny object because it's not aligned with you. Your soul is not being called to it. It's your logical brain saying, that worked for someone else, so it could work for me. But that's not your calling, right? Your calling is the desire part. It excites you, it lights you up, you feel passion in it. So, another thing with shiny object syndrome you have to be careful of is, am I avoiding completing a project because of fear? And that's like a whole nother topic. I don't know if I'll get into that today. That's a great topic for another episode. But we do need to be cautious that when we are following the things that light us up, that we are also not avoiding finishing a project because of the fears and insecurity around putting it out into the world, right? And the judgments that might come, or the perfectionism that gets in the way. And so that's something to also be cautious of. However, following your heart, following the soul threads is never something to feel shame about. And so stop worrying what other people are thinking if you're like, oh, they're going to judge me because now she's doing this and now she's doing that. Never mind what everyone is thinking. Follow your soul threads, right? I'm sure a lot of people criticized Steve Jobs in many different ways, and look how successful he became because he trusted his intuition, even if he didn't know how the dots were going to connect. Looking forward, looking back, he's like, "Oh, I see it now, right? It all worked out." And so trusting in some higher power that is guiding you on this path to use your gifts, use your skills in the most beneficial way at the biggest capacity. And so that's another thing to remember, is that divine timing, especially on this last day of the year, the last day of 2024. It's usually a time of reflection, and you're looking back at the year, and maybe you didn't quite accomplish all of the things that you wanted to accomplish. Maybe you have some goals that you got distracted from or didn't work out due to unforeseen circumstances or things that were out of your hand, right? That were out of your control. And it's important to remember that there is a season for everything and your season is coming, and to trust in that divine timing. One thing I like to tell people is let go of the timeline, don't let go of the dream. The timeline is put there to light a fire under your butt. You set a goal, you set a deadline so that you try for it, right? We don't set goals so that we'll achieve them. We set goals so that we'll try. You set that date, you try as hard as you can, and then you leave it up to God to see how it's going to pan out. And if divine timing doesn't have it come out in your timeline, let go of the timeline. Don't let go of the dream. Keep moving forward. I remember at the end of 2020, so 2020 was kind of like the start of my personal development. I would say at the end of 2019, really. But 2020 is when it really took off because we were so isolated. And that is when I first got into entrepreneurship. I started reading personal development books, self help books. I started really growing and getting out of my comfort zone. I took a lot of courses and learned a lot of things, right? I was just in this constant state of learning and growing and achieving. And I even wrote a book that year. And I had this in the beginning of the year, before we even knew about the pandemic. I had these recordings that an old band, I was in a band ugh, many years before, and we had recorded this EP, this 5-track EP, and I had only released one of the songs. And there was 4 songs on there that had not been edited, had not been mixed and mastered, that were sitting on this hard drive for like 7 years. And I had moved away. I didn't have my band anymore. I pursued a career as a social worker and therapist. I was a mom. I had 4 kids now. I have 5 now, by the way, but back in 2020, I had 4. And I was like, you know what? I want to put these songs out into the world. It's about time. And so I found a producer. I hit him up. I sent him the tracks. And he was like, yeah, it should take a couple weeks. This was back in March, mind you. And then the pandemic hit, and everybody was like, we're out of jobs. We can't go anywhere. Let's go to the studio and make music. And he got slammed with work. And so all year long, I'm checking in on him like, hey, how's the tracks coming? Have you worked on it? It was supposed to take 2 weeks. And all year he was working on it. I loved the arrangements he came up with. They were great. But at the end of the year, I was kind of nagging on him like, hey, man, I've been patient. It's been like 9 months, where's my songs? And he finalized them and sent them to me, and I was not happy with the quality of the audio. And he said it had to do with the person who mastered it. If you're not familiar with music, sorry about it. I don't know how to explain mixing and mastering, but it was just like, it did not sound how it used to sound. It had this tinny quality. And I was like, what happened to the tracks? Like, I loved his arrangements of the songs. I was so impressed with them, but the audio quality at the end just didn't sound right. And so I was like, I can't send this out. I can't release this. I hit him back up. I think it was like New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. It was probably New Year's Day. He's probably all hungover and just like celebrated New Year's. And I kind of sent a not so nice message that was like, I'm irritated. Like, this does not sound good. I know I already paid you out, but dude, you got to try to fix this. Um, and I think I was mostly feeling really discouraged because I had all these big goals and plans set for 2020, and none of them were accomplished by the end of the year. And I was like, dang, I really felt so frustrated that I had been working on myself so hard and learning and growing and actually removed myself from so many distractions in the world. And yet here I wasn't even getting my goals done. And so I was kind of blaming it on this guy too, right? Like, at least this was one thing I could have had done, was release my songs, and they're not ready. So anyways, he was really nice about it, worked on it again, sent it back to me. Honestly, the quality still sounded the same to me, but I just gave up. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to let go of the perfectionism. I said I was going to save perfectionism for another episode, but here we are talking about it again. I was going to let go of this perfectionism and just release it. So I decided to release it, and it ended up coming out in February of 2021 instead of at the end of 2020 like I really wanted to. So divine timing, right? I just had to wait a little bit longer than I wanted to. And I thought, you know what? Since I'm putting these songs out there, why don't I just pitch it to a local radio station? Who knows, right? Like, can't hurt to try. So I just emailed someone from KWXX, local radio on the Big Island of Hawaii, and they loved my song and they aired it. Even with the junk quality that I didn't think it was good quality, I was annoyed with how it came out, and that was my first song I ever got, first recorded song I ever got on the radio, and they continue to play that song occasionally, even today. And since then, I have had two other songs make it onto the radio as well, because that opened the door for it. And so that divine timing, you get so upset that you set a goal for yourself and then you don't reach it. But if you just hold on a little bit longer, let go of the timeline, keep moving forward on your goal, don't drop it just because it didn't happen when you wanted it to. Keep moving forward, and things could turn out even better than you imagined in the end, right? So, breaking it down, pay attention to your intuition, follow the soul threads, recognize when it is shiny object syndrome versus a soul thread, and let go of the timeline, but don't let go of the dream. We're coming into 2025 now. Set those intentions for yourself. Take some time to get clear on what you want. And actually, I mentioned my masterclass earlier tonight. I held an online masterclass called Reflect, Reset, and Rise. And what we did was we reflected back on 2024, both the good and the not so good. We reset our focus, what we need to release and recenter on. And then we set intentions for how we want to rise up to the next level in 2025. It's a very interactive masterclass with journal prompts and helping you to gain clarity and insight on your own life. And I am sending out to the recording to those who are interested in taking this time to set aside time and get clear on their intentions for the year. So check me out on my Instagram, Sarah Fui Coaching on Instagram, SARAHFUI Coaching. And I'll post up some links on how you can sign up to receive that recording so that you can set your intentions and goals for this upcoming year. Have a beautiful New Year's Eve and stay safe tonight.